Hi, everybody. I'm Vladimir Jutiv. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and around the world. Check out these monitors behind me. If you didn't know, because you've been tuning in every day since we relaunched this broadcast, these are feeds coming into us from all over our CBS stations and affiliates across the country. If it's happening out there, we're going to bring it to you live right here on CBS News 24/7. Let's begin. 12 days and counting. Vice President Kamala Harris says she believes Donald Trump is a fascist, while the former president accuses Harris of destroying the country. That's where we are now. We're on the trail with both campaigns. It's back to negotiating after machinists at Boeing say no to the company's latest deal, which included a 35% pay raise, but no pension. And a new report released just now by the United Nations paints a bleak picture on global warming. We'll explore what nations are among the world's top emitters of greenhouse gases. This is CBS News 24/7. All right, happening right now in the Middle East, Secretary of State Antony Blinken has announced an additional $135 million in U.S. aid for Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. And this comes as America's top diplomat is in Doha as he continues his latest tour of the Middle East as part of an effort to revive those ceasefire talks. For more developments in the region, I want to bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio, who's joining me live right now from Tel Aviv. Ramy, give me the latest. What are you hearing about Blinken's shuttle diplomacy in the region?
First off, about that new amount of money, $135 million, that's supposed to go towards humanitarian assistance, water sanitation, and internal health. What we don't know the details is how that will actually be applied, how that will, of course, get in, considering the situation happening all along the Gaza Strip. But in another development, just moments ago, Blinken and Qatar's prime minister said that negotiators will meet Israel's team for hostage and ceasefire talks. So this appears to be at least a little bit of a light, a little bit of a breakthrough here. Blinken also said that he anticipates that negotiators will be getting together in the coming days, a signal to some kind of timeline. But what he said also is that they haven't determined whether Hamas on the other side is prepared to engage, but at least the next step, they say, is to just get negotiators together. In another development, Qatar's premier said that they have recently re-engaged themselves with Hamas after Yahya Sinwar was killed earlier this month. What we're still waiting for, though, of course, is to learn who they are speaking to at Hamas after Sinwar in this post-Sinwar age. It would not be unexpected if Blinken and the Qataris talked about who that might be and how the U.S. and other countries might deal with someone, whether it's someone on more the hardline spectrum of things or someone who might be a little bit more open to a peace deal.
So Ramy, help our audience understand. Obviously, there's this diplomatic push to end the fighting, but the fighting continues right now. Given that the leaders of Hamas, many of the support personnel and leaders in Lebanon, southern Lebanon, who control Hezbollah, are being taken out by the Israelis. What are they saying is their goal now? Obviously, the ultimate goal is to bring the hostages home. But militarily speaking, what is the strategy going forward?
Well, what appears to be happening, Vlad, is that what's happening in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon with the IDF, is some kind of copying of the proverbial playbook that the IDF did and is continuing to do in Gaza, taking out what it says are Hezbollah militants, Hezbollah infrastructure. Over the course of the past 24 hours, the IDF said that they took out another weapons cache in southern Lebanon, in the Doha region of Beirut, southern Beirut, which is known to be the Hezbollah stronghold there. So while they say one thing is to get to this hostage and this ceasefire deal, what it really looks also very much so is that after Hamas, for the most part, we know that there's still remnants in Gaza, for the most part have been taken out, the focus has now been shifted to Hezbollah to try to do something at least similar to take out those Hezbollah militants there.
All right. Ramy Inocencio reporting from Tel Aviv for us this morning. Thank you, Ramy. The U.S. Secretary of Defense, meanwhile, Lloyd Austin, has spoken with his Israeli counterparts to express concerns over recent Israeli strikes against the Lebanese army. For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata. So, Charlie, what more can you tell us about this phone call between Austin and the Israeli Defense Minister, Yoav Gallant?
Yeah, Vlad, these are relatively routine, but if you forgive me while I just pull out, I've got the statement here, just the bullet points. So he expresses deep concern about the strikes against the Lebanese armed forces and UNIFIL, the UN forces in Lebanon, urging them to take all necessary steps to ensure their safety and security. This is a repeated message we get pretty much every phone call, reaffirming unwavering and enduring U.S. support for Israel, but this is noting the deployment of that THAAD missile defense system, which we know is in place in order to come to the defense of Israelis. First time U.S. troops have been on the ground there. And this is another important note. Welcome the movement of humanitarian assistance through the Erez crossing, urged Israel to address the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. And the reason that's important is because the clock is ticking on that 30-day notice that was given just over a week ago for the Israelis to do more, a letter that he himself had signed, Austin had signed, saying the Israelis have got to do more to address the humanitarian situation in Gaza or risk losing U.S. military support. So that one's kind of important. It's also worth noting this is the first time the two gentlemen have spoken since that leak. And they did call, we understand, the defense secretary spoke to Minister Gallant after that leak was made public. They didn't share any details about that. And really, there hasn't been much progress in terms of the investigation.
All right, so let's talk about those comments from the Secretary of Defense where he said that there was evidence, Charlie, and we were talking about this yesterday, that North Korean troops are now inside Russia. What does this mean? Explain to our viewers what this potentially means and why they're there. I mean, the Russian army is one of the biggest armies in the world. Why would they need any kind of military support from the North Koreans?
Vlad, exactly that. What are they doing there? And that's what the defense secretary said. We don't know. We don't know whether they're going to be deployed. President Zelensky, Ukrainian President Zelensky, said they will be deployed. There are about 3,000 of them. That's a brigade. And really, it depends on what sort of impact they'll have. As you said, 3,000 people isn't much when you consider that the Russians have probably lost around 650,000 casualties, dead and wounded, since the war began. And there are hundreds of thousands of soldiers deployed. So it's really what is the intent of how they're going to use these North Korean forces. Are they an elite commando unit? Will they be sort of self-contained? Will they be well-equipped? Are they trained? I mean, people here are saying that none of them have ever fought before, so they don't have any battle experience. So is it symbolic? The concern is, and the defense secretary pointed at this, it wasn't just that one-way street where the North Koreans have been supplying Putin with troops, and they've been supplying them with weapons and material and artillery for months. What does North Korea get out of it? And that is a huge concern here. You know, the Indo-Pacific is at the top of the agenda here. Yes, we have the war in Ukraine going on in the Middle East, but what impact is this going to have on North Korea and in that region?
Yeah, that is the big question. Charlie Daggett reporting from the Pentagon for us this morning. Charlie, thank you, my friend. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, just 12 more days until Election Day, and it's coming down to the wire for both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump as the polls show they are neck and neck. Let's bring in CBS News campaign reporter and attorney Katrina Kaufman for the latest on the Trump campaign. Katrina, the former president staked this claim over Georgia. That is where Vice President Harris is campaigning today. In fact, she's bringing out the heavy guns. Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, is set to take to the stage for the very first time with Kamala Harris. What is the former president, Trump in this case, what's the strategy for him in Georgia?
Good morning, Vlad. So yes, Trump is really focused on winning Georgia, and two elements of this strategy are, one, encouraging people to vote early. At one of his rallies yesterday, he was saying, vote early, or both of them really, vote early, although he also can't help himself. He always has to caveat it with, but also be careful, make sure that your vote is counted, because we have to remember that Georgia was an epicenter of controversy back in 2020. It's where the infamous call to Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger happened, with Trump encouraging him to find almost 12,000 votes. But Trump wants people to get out and vote as soon as possible. Another element there is low propensity voters. There are all these Trump Force 47 volunteers going door to door, trying to encourage people who haven't typically come out to vote. They're letting them know how they can get registered, how they can cast their votes, and the campaign thinks that this could make a big difference for Trump in the state, because what they really want is for this election to be too big to rig, for the margin to be so large that no one can question that Trump has won there. I think we also have some sound from one of his rallies yesterday.
We're going to win Georgia. We're going to defeat Kamala Harris, and we are going to make America great again. If Kamala gets 4 more years, she will obliterate our economy, kill millions of jobs, and destroy your family finances forever.
And of course, a big part of Trump's strategy is criticizing Kamala Harris. He says that she'll be bad for the economy, that she will allow thousands and thousands of migrants to come across the border and take jobs. But today she'll be in Georgia giving her message with Obama.
All right. So the other thing, Katrina, that I want to talk about is the current vice president has comments about those comments made by the former chief of staff to President Trump, John Kelly, in which he called Trump a fascist. He first defined what fascism is and what a fascist is by the textbook definition of the word, and then he applied it to the former president. There's audio recording of that. Let's remind our viewers that John Kelly is a retired 4-star Marine general. He's a Gold Star father, having lost his son on the field of battle. Kamala Harris, in making her case to the American people yesterday in a town hall with CNN, essentially echoed what John Kelly said, given that so many of the former president's cabinet members and folks who've worked for him have used the very same language that General Kelly is using. How is he responding to that?
Yeah, you're right, Vlad. Last night, Vice President Kamala Harris said that she agreed that Trump is a fascist. What Trump is saying is that what John Kelly says is a lie. He said that Kelly has Trump derangement syndrome. He called Kelly a bad general. He says that he didn't want his advice anymore, and he told Kelly to move on. So really, he's just trying to discredit Kelly and discredit his claims and these stories that he's telling.
All right, bad general, that's up to debate, but let's just remember that General Kelly has served his country honorably for decades, as did his son, and Donald Trump received deferments during the Vietnam War. All right, Katrina Kaufman for us, reporting from Detroit. Thank you. Let's turn to CBS News campaign reporter Nidia Cavazos, who's been following Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign and joins me now. Nidia, we were just talking about Kamala Harris and her town hall with CNN. She's making these direct comments at Donald Trump, backing up that warning from former Chief of Staff John Kelly. At this point, her campaign is starting to use incredibly strong language when describing the former president. You'll recall, obviously, when she came into this race, there was a sense of optimism, there was enthusiasm and hope, but now she's sort of using this very, very tough language because he's been using incredibly tough language on her, including mispronouncing her name as just for starts.
That's exactly right, Vlad. Good morning. We've seen these changes, like you mentioned. It started off on a focus of, joy, and that there really wasn't a mention of former President Donald Trump. But with less than 2 weeks to go until Election Day, we're seeing these changes, and Harris and her campaign are really focusing on Trump, his character, what people around him who were there during his administration have been saying about him, and everything is pretty much centered around Trump and getting Americans to realize this is what you would have under a second Trump administration or a second Trump presidency. This is what we're hearing from Harris, but Harris's claim to voters is also, don't take it from me, but listen to the people who most knew Trump and directly worked with him. And this is why they're playing up Kelly's remarks. This is why we heard her give remarks in D.C. yesterday before heading to battleground states.
A top question, Nidia, for many voters has been what makes Vice President Kamala Harris different from President Biden? How does she plan to set herself apart from the president? She's given some answers in which she says that she wouldn't have changed anything that that President Biden did during his 4 years in office. But what is she now saying about what she would do differently?
This has been a question that Harris has been asked during interviews and by voters as well, and it's been a difficult question for her. We've seen her change her answers, initially saying she wouldn't have done anything different from Biden administration or President Biden, but now we're also hearing a more defensive answer saying my administration wouldn't be a continuation of President Biden, and she also claims that with the new presidency, she would bring in new ideas, new leadership, and this is because she says she has a different background, different experiences than that of President Biden. And she has also made it a point to make it known that she's not a politician that has spent her entire career in D.C., as it is the case with President Biden.
All right, Nidia Cavazos reporting from Washington for us this morning. Thank you, Nidia. Over to Georgia now, where the Secretary of State's office says it was the target of an unsuccessful cyber attack earlier this month. Officials say it was a coordinated attempt to crash the website where people can request absentee ballots. They noticed the attack amid a spike in attempts to access the page. The Secretary of State's office told CBS News they don't know who was behind the foiled cyber attack, but it may have been a foreign nation. All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with a first look at the national forecast. Hi, Grant.
Hey, good morning, Vlad. Look, all pretty calm across most of the country. We do have some places to track today, some showers moving across the northern tier states. That area of rain is pretty benign at this point, but as it tracks to the east as we go throughout the day today, it's going to begin to encounter a little bit of a clash between some cooler air to the north and warmer conditions to the south, and that's going to be the focus for some showers and storms that could get a little strong later today. So places like eastern Kansas, northern Missouri into Iowa. We could see some hail, 1 inch to 1.25 inches in diameter. Could see some gusty winds with that as well. Now, I mentioned the warmer conditions that's sort of fueling some of those stronger storms. That's coming out of the southern tier states because of that high pressure system. I'm telling you, though, it's crazy. I mean, we're going into the last part of October now. Many places still looking at record high temperatures, 90s across most of the Lone Star State today. In fact, those low 90s spread all the way into portions of Kansas. Wichita approaching 92 degrees this afternoon under mostly sunny skies. Those temperatures are running 10 to 15 degrees warmer than normal. There may be a little bit of relief as we head through the second half of the week toward the weekend, but still, Vlad, warmer than normal conditions across the southern tier. But we do have more autumnal-like conditions for the Northeast. We'll take a look at the rest of the country here in just a bit. Back to you.
All right, we'll look forward to that, Grant. Thank you very much. 2 suspects in Turkey killed 5 people and wounded 20 others in a terror attack on an aerospace company. Coming up, how the Turkish military responded. You are streaming CBS News 24/7. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. One of the feeds that we're following behind me here, check this out. You're looking at a live look at the celebrations right here in New York City as the New York Liberty basketball team celebrate their first WNBA title with the Victory Parade. We've got live coverage from our CBS New York affiliate later this hour. All of our correspondents at WCBS are out there on the parade route talking to the fans. I'll tell you this, when I was coming into work this morning from Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Bridge at like 4:45 a.m. was already packed with vehicles because people wanted to get a good spot for this parade. So we're going to have a lot more on it a little bit later in the show. Stick around for that. Meanwhile, let's continue with politics. The Biden White House is asking for a push in the ceasefire negotiations that are happening in the Middle East this morning. And the next person to occupy the Oval Office will have to make some very tough decisions about those conflicts as well. The candidates seem to be offering very different plans on how they would handle the situation. Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes is live on the North Lawn for us this morning. So, Nancy, this is one of those things the commander-in-chief always has to deal with, but this is something that is going to be a holdover from a previous administration. So how are the candidates trying to stand apart from each other on the specific issue of what's happening in the Middle East?
Right. So both of these candidates, if they become president, will have a lot to deal with when it comes to the Middle East, no matter what President Biden manages to accomplish or not accomplish over the next couple of months. Former President Trump has been pretty bombastic, outspoken on this issue. He has made a lot of claims. One of them is that he is more pro-Israel than Kamala Harris is. Another is that somehow the state of Israel will be annihilated entirely if Harris becomes president. That is, obviously extremely far-fetched, but he has made a lot of his solidarity with Israeli leadership. He mentions that he talks to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, even though he is not currently Trump is not currently in office. He talks a lot less about a two-state solution than Harris does. She has made it clear that that is one of the ultimate goals, as a Palestinian state and an Israeli state peacefully coexisting side by side. She has also expressed more concern about the Palestinian people and the deaths in the Gaza Strip as a result of this conflict. And that is a reflection in part of the fact that that there are people in her base who are very concerned that the Biden administration hasn't done enough to support the Palestinian people and to prevent more deaths in Gaza. And so these two individuals bring very different perspectives to this issue, and I think it's pretty safe to assume, Vlad, that they would bring very different policy proposals to the forefront if they were to be elected as well.
Let me ask you, Nancy, about the Secretary of State, who is also traveling in the region. We've talked about this, Nancy, that President Biden had hoped in the last few months that he had in office that he would be able to achieve an elusive ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. But there isn't any indication that that's on the horizon, even with the death of Yahya Sinwar.
That's right. In fact, the Secretary of State just a short time ago held a press conference with the Qatari Prime Minister. No report of any kind of breakthrough in negotiations. The fact that talks are continuing, I suppose, is a good sign. But you're right that the Biden administration had overtly said, from the president to the vice president on down, hopefully Sinwar's death will lead to some kind of a shakeup in these talks. And while there has been some re-engagement on the part of the Qataris, on the part of Hamas, it hasn't yielded any concrete results yet. That's what we're watching for.
All right. Nancy Cordes for us on the front lawn of the White House. We appreciate it as always, Nancy. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Okay, we've got an update on the story we watched unfold live yesterday. Turkey has hit Kurdish military targets in both Iraq and Syria following a terror attack in their capital city of Ankara. The shooting and the explosion killed 5 people and wounded more than 20 others. Responding police killed 2 of the suspects. CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tayeb is following the developments from London and joins me now to discuss. So Imtiaz, what do we know about this retaliatory strike? It's been quite some time that we've seen this kind of activity allegedly from the Kurds. What are you hearing?
Yeah, hey, Vlad. Well, we have a really alarming and fast-moving situation here. As we've been saying, Turkey has launched a series of strikes against suspected Kurdish militant targets in Syria and Iraq after blaming the Kurdish Workers' Party, or PKK, for a deadly attack on the headquarters of the Turkish National Aerospace Company on Wednesday that killed 5 people. Now, Turkey's national intelligence organization said it had targeted numerous, quote, strategic locations used by the PKK. Now, there was no immediate statement from the PKK on the attack or the Turkish airstrikes, which reportedly targeted military, intelligence, energy, and infrastructure facilities, as well as ammunition depots. Now, according to a Turkish security official, armed drones were used in the strikes, reportedly killing at least 12 people. Vlad.
And what do we know about that the initial attack first, Imtiaz, but also why was this aerospace company targeted? I mean, I think for those of us outside of Turkey and here in the United States, we're trying to understand what the link is.
Yeah, very good questions. Well, what we know is that yesterday, Wednesday, 2 attackers, a man and a woman, killed 5 people, as we've been saying, and wounded 22 others in what Ankara is calling a terrorist attack. Now, they were armed with assault rifles, and the pair set off explosives as they opened fires. Now, security teams were dispatched as soon as the attack started at around 3:30 p.m. local time. The 2 assailants were killed, and more than 20 people were injured in the attack, which occurred a day after the head of a far-right nationalist party allied to the Turkish president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, raised the possibility that the PKK's imprisoned leader could be granted parole if he renounced violence and disbanded his organization. Now, Abdullah Öcalan's PKK has been fighting for autonomy in southeast Turkey in a conflict that has killed tens of thousands of people since the 1980s. The PKK is considered a terrorist group by Turkey and its Western allies, a characterization the PKK denies. Vlad.
All right, MTS Tybe for us reporting from London. Thank you, MTS. Immigration remains a hot-button issue with less than 2 weeks to go until Election Day. After the break, we're going to check back in with our Omar Villafranca. He's on a trip along the U.S.-Mexico border to find out what he's hearing from voters. We'll be right back. Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the stories we're following for you this morning. Federal agents found more than 120 guns in the home of a man accused of shooting 3 times at the Arizona Democratic Party's campaign office. Jeffrey Michael Kelly was arrested Tuesday by Tempe police. His lawyer says the firearms his clients had were for sport and that all of them were obtained legally. Prosecutors say Kelly was preparing to commit a, quote, mass casualty act. Apple and Goldman Sachs have been ordered to pay a combined $89 million fine for mishandling their Apple Card partnership. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says both companies mishandled tens of thousands of transaction disputes and misled cardholders into thinking their Apple device purchases were interest-free. Those consumers were not automatically opted in to the promoted interest-free option and were charged interest. Apple claims it worked with Goldman Sachs in order to resolve what it described as an inadvertent issue. Music superstar Cardi B says she has been hospitalized due to a medical emergency. The rapper said on Instagram she's recovering, but didn't mention from what. She will miss a performance Saturday night in Atlanta, where she was expected to headline a music festival. But she told fans not to worry. She'll be back, quote, saying, better and stronger soon. Thousands of striking Boeing factory workers voted to reject the company's latest contract offer. That means the strike will go on, a major setback for the company. Chris Van Cleve is outside a Boeing facility in Renton, Washington. Chris, good morning.
Well, good morning. It is not the start to the day that Boeing executives had hoped after 64% of strikers voted down their proposed 4-year labor agreement. Now, while that was an improvement from the first offer that was defeated almost unanimously, it shows there is still a long way to go to ending this strike, which is now on day 42. 33,000 workers will stay on the picket line, shutting down the bulk of Boeing's airplane production. The rejected deal called for a 35% wage hike, up from Boeing's initial offer of 25%. It also included increased health and retirement contributions, but the major sticking point for workers remains the loss of their pension. Boeing has said that pension is not coming back. Negotiations will have to continue, though there was no timeline for that. Boeing declined comment, but the vote came just hours after the company reported dismal third-quarter earnings that included losing about $6 billion in the quarter alone.
All right, Chris Van Cleve reporting for us. Thank you, Chris. Let's get back to our top story right now, and it will be our top story until Election Day, because there's only 12 days until you go to the ballots. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are looking to win over voters in 3 key swing states today. CBS News political director Finn Gomez joins me now with the impact that the race could have on your wallet. So Finn, by all measures, economists say that the economy is strong, and it's stronger than it's been in the last 4 years. But for people who are still feeling the pinch at the grocery store, at the gas station, they're not seeing what economists are seeing. And in fact, some of them don't even believe those numbers. So how is the vice president making the case for why the economic policies of her administration are those policies that have led to this strong economy?
Right, Vlad. Yeah, she's really focusing on the middle class, that big, large swath of the electorate. And her messaging has been that the economy is doing better. If you look at the different economic indicators, it has gotten better. In some polling also, Vlad, I would like to point out, including the Bloomberg Morning Consult poll that came out across, of the battleground states, of the 7 battleground states, that she had closed the gap on the economy. So maybe that message is being implemented and is impacting potential voters. But I would also like to add, Vlad, that in that same poll across the 7 battleground states, it is still a dead heat. On average, it was 49 to 49. 29 when you compared her to Donald Trump. I did talk to a top Democrat who is not with the Harris campaign, but works with the Harris campaign, who did say that there has been a little bit of a disconnect, he thought, on the messaging, not to middle-class voters, but to blue-collar voters and working-class voters. However, they do feel that they have potentially turned the page with, just like you said, Vlad, just 12 short days to go until Election Day.
And what about the former president, Finn? How is he messaging what this administration would look like the second time around when it comes to the economy?
When it comes to the economy, like Donald Trump has essentially been messaging that that Harris is a continuation of the Biden administration. She's the vice president, after all, but also a continuation of Biden inflation, as they derisively call Biden economic policies, and really tying her to the inflation that you saw in the post-pandemic period, where and you know, folks are still reeling from it, still feeling the effect. If you look at the top issues, Vlad, that is still a top issue, is the cost of things, inflation. And even though those indicators are happening, you see them, it may not be felt across the electorate. It may not be felt with blue-collar voters, or they may not believe that it's fully happening. So there's some of that, I think. But overall, the messaging right now, Vlad, will be from Donald Trump in these last 12 days will be all about immigration, immigration, immigration. Vlad.
All right, Finn Gomez for us this morning. Thanks, Finny.
Thanks, Vlad.
All right, it is day 4 in our journey across America's border towns. As Election Day approaches, the stakes are high for many voters who live and work along the U.S.-Mexico border. You just heard that from Finn Gomez, our political director. And Omar Villafranca is traveling nearly 1,700 miles from Texas to California and taking a pit stop in Yuma, Arizona, where border security is a top concern every day for both law enforcement and the people that call that region home. And that is where we find Omar this morning. Omar, good to see you, my friend. So one of the major issues that's impacting the border, and those of us here in the United States and people across the border as well, is drug trafficking, the scourge of drugs. What are we learning about drug smuggling, specifically at the Arizona border?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, Vlad, because this area, CBP, they categorize it as the Tucson sector. So every port of entry in Arizona is in the Tucson sector. 66% of the fentanyl that has been seized trying to come into the U.S. was caught here in the state of Arizona. So this is the pathway for more than half of the fentanyl that's trying to be trafficked into the United States. That's more than 11,000 pounds of fentanyl that was meant for the streets. So obviously the interdiction of that, catching that, is a huge deal here in Arizona. Now, let me give some context here. More than half of the fentanyl that is trafficked into the U.S., or trying to come into the U.S., comes in through a port of entry. Now, does some get through on, 1 or 2 people smuggling stuff in? Yes, or dozens trying to get in on person? Yes, but most of it, weight-wise, the big stuff, the big shipments, come through a port of entry on a truck.
And so what are people in Arizona telling you about what needs to be done about border security when this next administration, whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, comes in?
Well, they're saying, one, that Congress needs to finally do something. Not only the president, but the president, whoever that's going to be, needs to work with members of Congress, be a leader. I had one sheriff in Cochise County basically say, lock them all in a room, put pizza under the door, and don't let them out until they figure out border security and immigration laws. Because in Cochise County, in the state, they were basically feeling that it's not safe. The sheriff told me, I don't feel like this area is safe for the community here because of the amount of drugs and the people that are moving these drugs in.
All right, Omar. And you were also talking to folks in Cochise County. What are they telling you there?
Yeah. Well, in Cochise County, the law enforcement's telling us that they get people who run, not people who present themselves at the border, that they run. And this is what the Cochise County Sheriff, Mark Daniels, told me.
That's what I wanted to hear.
This is a quality of life issue. As a sheriff elected, and I've served this county 40 years, been sheriff 12, to uphold the law and sustain their quality of life, and that is through the rule of law. And to see where we're at today, and here, 3.5 years later, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of this border. It's ebb and flow. This is the ugliest I've seen it. It's ugliest because we're not working together with the federal government.
Bottom line, Vlad, they just want something done in the next administration.
That's what I wanted to hear. Omar Villafranca, thank you, my brother. Appreciate it. All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore for another look at the national forecast. Grant.
Hey, Vlad. Yeah, so look, really, overall, pretty calm conditions across most of the country. There is a weather story, though, that's been dominating the eastern half of the United States, and that's the relatively dry conditions. Really, since Milton, there's been very little rainfall across the eastern half of the United States. And part that's due to this dominating ridges of high pressure. Now, I put on the wind streams on this map here, and you can see wind flows clockwise around the center of high pressure. So you see the high pressure pushing wind from the northwest to the southeast there across the eastern half of the United States and then across the southern plains there. See how the winds are coming in out of the south? That wind flow and that high pressure system is really just keeping the summertime heat locked in place, not just in places like Texas, but all the way into the central plains. Let me put on the forecast high temperatures across the area for this afternoon. Let's start in places like, well, we'll say Dallas, okay? Dallas looking at high temperatures near 90 today. You say, well, it's Texas, right? It's hot in Texas. Well, not this hot. This is actually near record high temperatures. Look at this warmth, though, spreading all the way into places like Wichita, Kansas. 92 degrees, but that warmth is running into some cooler air that's coming in behind a system that's moving in from the northern tier states. And that, I'll show you in just a second, is actually producing the threat for some stronger storms that we could see later on this afternoon into this evening. But those high temperatures in the upper 80s to lower 90s, still unseasonably warm, certainly more like summertime or at least early fall than like late October. There's that high pressure system. It is producing that record heat across much of the southern plains states. Temperatures running 10 to 15 degrees warmer than normal. I mentioned that chance for severe weather today. Hail, gusty winds there across eastern Kansas into northern Missouri and Iowa. Vlad, back to you.
All right, Grant, thanks very much, my brother. Appreciate it. There is an alarming new report from the UN that is warning of catastrophic global warming. Next, we're going to discuss whether or not there's a way to reverse course. They're streaming CBS News 24/7. We're just giving you another live look, folks, right here at CBS News 24/7 of those celebrations that are happening not very far from our CBS News broadcast center. The New York Liberty are celebrating their first WNBA title with a victory parade. Oh, man, it looks like a lot. Look, there's the team. They got the trophy. This is awesome. We're going to bring you live coverage from CBS News New York in just a moment, so stick around for that. But before we do, let's talk about global emissions and global warming. We are way off target when it comes to how dire things are. That is what a new report from the United Nations says about cutting greenhouse gas emissions and avoiding the worst threats of climate change, like drought, floods, and fires. Our national environmental correspondent, David Schechter, joins me now. David, the report was just released at the top of the hour. What are the headlines? What are you seeing?
Vlad, really it's this phrase, technically possible. So the UN is saying that in order for the world to achieve its emissions targets, which are ambitious, it is still technically possible. But the reality of what the report paints is that it's really not, that nations of the world have committed to reducing their emissions with their what they call ambitions. But in reality, we are very far away from hitting this 1.5 degrees of warming, which is this magic number, because it's bad, but it would avoid the worst of climate change. Really, what we're on track for right now, the UN is telling us, is 3 degrees of warming, which is significantly more painful with all those things that you talked about, with drought and flood and fires and sea level rise. So the headline here is that we are way off target.
All right, then. So dire. What do we do, David?
I've got the solution right here. Well, actually, so the nations of the world, so 1.5 is that number. Really, now the next idea is, can the world keep it to 2? Sort of, that's the informal way to look at this. And every year, the nations of the world get together. This year, they'll be in November in Azerbaijan. And there will be a lot of pressure there for the countries who have made these pledges to really step up and meet them and really have, cut in half their emissions by 2030. So a lot of work to do behind the words that countries have given. And so will that happen? I don't know. But at that time, and again, another ratcheting up of this problem is getting more intense, it's getting worse, and countries need to be responsible for their emissions.
As you know, the vice president has called climate change an existential threat. Former President Donald Trump has called it a hoax. It's very difficult to get something done when you have, half the country believing one thing and another half believing another. But the question becomes, for those folks who believe in climate change, David, but say, well, why should the United States have to cut its emissions if countries like China and India are not making any inroads in doing that? If the United States were able to, if the Democrats were able to win the White House and win control of Congress and push through some meaningful climate legislation, any little bit is good, but in the grand scheme of things, how much would that help if you have other countries, in some cases who are bigger than the United States, who are still emitting pollutants into the air?
So many good questions there, Vlad. So I think the first thing is you look at the list and you see that China is above the United States, not by a lot. So they're the biggest emitter. We shouldn't care about them. But historically, like since the industrial times and before China became this juggernaut economically, we as a country have emitted way more carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide goes up into the atmosphere and it stays there for hundreds of years. So our contribution cumulatively is much larger than anyone else's in the world. And so the election and what happens in the election and how this is dealt with, two totally different perspectives, is going to make a big difference on whether the United States continues to meet its emissions goals and its targets as we go to these meetings in Azerbaijan.
Yeah, it's incredibly important, David, and I just think that in a world where we are repeating over and over again images and showing images of a former president at McDonald's, and whether or not somebody grew up in a middle-class household, this is something that is going to be my child's problem, your children's problems, everybody's children's problem. It really is disconcerting to see this report. Thank you for reporting on it, David. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, as promised, we're going to have live coverage of the New York Liberty's Victory Parade. It is happening right here in New York City. You're going to check it out with us. WCBS is covering it. They are there. I saw Chris Raggi. All the stars from WCBS are there. Raggi's out there. He only works in the morning. So the fact that they got Raggi to get into a civvies and jump out there and do some live shots is a big deal. So you're going to want to stick around for that. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Happening now. We've been teasing it all morning long. The New York City Liberty WNBA team is holding a victory parade. This is, of course, after the team won its first WNBA championship. Let's take you live right now to coverage from CBS News, New York.
I think we heard from Steve earlier that this is just as much a moment for these fans here in New York City as it is for the players on the team. Is here right now, and the fans are so thrilled to have her here right now. Look at the energy. Look at the energy. She was the #1 draft pick in 2020, drafted to New York, the WNBA All-Star in 2022, 2023, 2024, an incredible shooter, and obviously made a big contribution for the winning game on Sunday at the Barclays Center. It's really inspiring to see. Oh, here we go. Here we go. We got some more music here. Inspiring to see so many women. Hey guys, you want to come in real quick? You don't want to talk to us? Let's talk to us. What a moment is this for you today?
I know this is so amazing. Just Brooklyn winning the championship.
Look at that. Of course, as you may recall, the New York Liberty beat the Minnesota Lynx in the finals in 5 games to clinch the title. Very, very cool. Look, folks, if you want to check out more of the coverage right here in New York, go to CBS News New York on their local stream. That does it for me, though, but stay right there. Elizabeth Cook is live from San Fran with all the breaking news coast to coast after the break. This is CBS News 24/7.